Two satellites beat the odds of a collision. Hawaii's new telescope zooms in on the sun. Aussie radio telescopes spot spinning stars twisting space-time. Plus the headlines. It's Talking Science for this Tuesday, Feb 4, 2020.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
Dr. Brad Tucker, happy Tuesday.
Yeah, how's it going?
Really good, my friend, really good. Brad, it's been pretty tough in the nation's capital the last week. Again, summer isn't relenting.
No. There was a fire that started here on the 27th, so last Monday on Australia Day. Started as a small thing in the evening and quickly grew to a monster over the weekend, causing a lot of people to be on alert, I would say, is the correct way of describing that.
And a lot of flashbacks to the 2003 bushfires.
That's right. Canberra had a massive bushfire in 2003. And, there's a lot of early similarities. It started out in the national park, far to the west, slowly grew. You have a couple really bad hot days. Had it gone north instead of south, it would have plowed right into the southern suburbs. I was amongst those who was anxiously watching. Again, we were never really in danger, or we weren't in any danger. We weren't really worried at any time. It was being alert, as they say. But yeah, a lot of early similarities. So far, the weather's died down a bit. It's a bit better to get under control. Still burning, still smoky, still growing. So yeah, as you said, summer is not done. And it was so bad, it created huge spot fires that they're now their own massive fire. That's how big this and kind of chaotic it's been.
Well, you can find Dr. Brad Tucker on Twitter with some updates on those fires as well, which has been...
Yeah, just from outside home. I mean, if you look at the fire map, there is a real possibility that there will be fires from nearly Albury connected all the way through to the coast if this grows anymore.
Well, of course, that's at btucker22 on Twitter and Dr. Brad Tucker on Facebook. I'm there on the Twitter sphere as well, at Miramat86. Brad, let's dive into these things.
Talking Science headlines.
And the first one that we've got, bidding farewell to one of the four great telescopes, Spitzer.
Yeah, after 16 years of operation, Spitzer, what we call one of NASA's great observatories, along with Hubble, Chandra, and XMM Newton, was bid farewell over the weekend and is now in that great graveyard in the sky.
Hopefully it doesn't crash into anything. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yes, hopefully not. This one's safe at least.
And Congress, or the US House Space Subcommittee, has made their spending recommendations for NASA, and if approved, it's pushing back the moon landing and focusing on Mars.
Yeah, this is one to watch out for. We've seen some flip-flopping of landing on the moon in 2028 and then 2024. And the appropriations committee that deals with NASA said, no, we want 2028. And yeah, we want to focus more on Mars and not really a lot on the moon. We would still land on the moon, but not. It still has to make its way through the whole House and then be approved with the Senate. So definitely one to keep an eye on and what it means for the Artemis mission and things like that.
Talking Science, stories of the week.
All right, well, let's hang around at home for now. And what was a 1 in 100 chance became a 1 in 20 chance late last week with two satellites potentially colliding. Thankfully, they didn't, but it could have made a nice little light show followed by quite a bit of a headache.
Yeah, it was interesting. We talked about the week before this DirecTV satellite and the problems it was having. And here, this collision was plotted, as you said, it went from like 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 100 to 1 in 200, then to 1 in 20. To put it to scale, people worry about collisions at the 1 in 10,000 level. That's when spacecraft would do a maneuver. The space station at 1 in 25,000, I think it is. So 1 in 20 is awfully really close as a collision for space. Too close. In fact, they passed within 12 meters of each other, which is not a lot when you're considering how these satellites are and the speeds they're traveling at.
It is incredible to put this into context because just I was watching a news report from Channel 9 News here in Australia from Sydney. They were talking about a near collision of two Qantas jets that were 500 metres apart. These two satellites were a lot closer than that, and thankfully they had less people on board, though.
That's right, but a lot faster. You know, it's when you're traveling 40,000 kilometers and you hit, that's not good. And so it was something that people were watching and waiting for. It's confirmed, as you said, they didn't collide. The maths worked, I guess, as you say. But, you know, it is this reality that as more and more satellites go up and more satellites eventually go defunct, which both of these were, the likelihood for collisions is increasing, and it'll keep increasing. And as those things hit each other, they produce thousands to tens of thousands of pieces of debris, which you can't control, which can stay up there for years with the possibility they crash and so on and so on.
Do we need to create some kind of satellite vacuum cleaner and head up there on the next SpaceX mission?
Well, look, cleaning up space is a big deal. It is a big focus on trying to clean up the space, not just limit it, but how do you clean it up? So there's a lot of stringent plans of how you deorbit a satellite, how you bring it down. But here in Australia, we're building laser systems to deorbit small pieces of debris. So we're talking about centimeter scale. So usually literally using lasers to shoot stuff down. Now, we don't vaporize it. One, because we get yelled at, I know. But two, you just create smaller bits, right? So the best way to get rid of it is the Earth's atmosphere. But then there's how do you deal with the bigger chunks? And there's groups in the UK that we talked about last year, building these giant magnetic harpoons to try and attach a space junk. So definitely a focus of a lot of research, as you said, how do we actually clean up space and not just stop polluting it?
Well, something that we haven't polluted, and I don't think we'll get the chance to, is the sun's surface and the new telescope in Hawaii. I'm back to these beautiful segues.
Polluting the sun would be a trick. That's almost a challenge.
Yeah, someone might take me up on it. That's the only problem.
True.
But this new telescope in Hawaii has managed to magnify the sun's surface, and it looks like some popcorn maybe in the process.
People said popcorn, caramel corn, baked beans. Yeah, it's a breathtaking photo. So this is from this new 4-meter telescope in Hawaii and Halikala, which is on the island of Maui, and it is the highest resolution image of the surface of the sun. So the resolution is about 30 kilometers, so that's what they can detail it. So it's about the size of a city. The features that you see are really about the size of U.S. states. So quite impressive that you can see it. As you said, we're really the GIF, the animation, the time lapse that they provided. You can literally see the surface bubbling. Like it's amazing.
It's incredible. I'm just watching it now as well, and to know that those little cells are the size of U.S. states. There still is quite a way that we could zoom into, really, isn't there?
It is, right? It just, the whole image that they released is about 35,000 kilometers across, so nearly 3 times the width of the Earth. So you're still looking at a really big patch of this star, but it's just amazing how far we've come, but also just how active the sun is. You know, we talk about when the sun releases sunspots, and they're the sizes of the Earth or much bigger. Well, this is important because if we can see then scales, not the size of the Earth, but of a U.S. state, you can actually potentially see how the sunspots originate, how they're actually created, how things grow, kind of going back to these, how is the solar weather created. So really complementary to the Solar Parker probe that we talked about.
And also working in, I was going to mention the Parker Solar Probe and also the NASA European Space Agency Solar Orbiter. So these three are sort of doing some detective work on our star to try and get a heads up on space weather, I guess.
And you need different ones. The other ones are so close to the sun, they can't look directly at the sun because it's so bright. So they have to look at the outside and the surface. This can kind of look through it. That's photosphere, the corona, and look actually directly at the surface. So really complementary, really working together here. And I think it'll be quite amazing to see the photos when they catch sunspots in eruption or coronal mass ejections. It'll be breathtaking to see, just as SOHO did 10 years ago when it really first started to pinpoint what the sun was doing.
Well, we're sort of pinpointing what another star is doing. That segue, I'll work on that for next time. And Einstein's greatest theory might be under a bit of a test here as we discover some spinning stars.
Yeah, a really cool thing. So when we think about the shape of space, it's this giant sheet. It's the space-time fabric. And if you're spinning around it, it's kind of like, imagine if you're mixing up, batter or something like that. It'll swirl around and all mix together. And this will produce ripples or waves going through the stuff, space-time. Now, we've known of gravitational waves for quite a while now. But what they caught was not just the waves going around, but it was actually causing space-time itself to kind of being dragged. So it's kind of like you're bunching it up and swirling around, so you get clumps of it, kind of like if you're mixing around, you get a clump of it more towards the spoon. And literally seeing what we call frame dragging, so a feature of movement through space, from two distant stars.
Is the common name of this going to be called Mondayitis?
It does warps time, so it might seem longer than it actually is. The interesting thing is that it has been detected with the satellite, Gravity Probe B, I think it was called, a number of years ago, detected frame dragging, as it's called, around the Earth. But this is a bigger scale and much further. So again, nice to see the shape of space as it goes, but also the fabric of space-time itself literally being shaped and warped. And all of these things are complementary. This, in addition to gravitational waves, it really probes the shape and nature of the universe of space-time itself. It's not this theoretical idea that's just made up. We have experiments that can test it, that can measure its effects.
And it was discovered by some Aussies working out of the Parkes Observatory.
And Molonglo, which is just outside Canberra here. And they've been monitoring a certain pair of stars, one involving a pulsar, for about 20 years now. So they've needed a long time of data to be measuring pulsars. So pulsars have a very specific spin rate. They're very fast. So they actually can be used as time. In fact, pulsars sometimes are used to help calibrate GPS clocks. They're so accurate and they're so precise. So when you have 20 years of precise time measurements, you can actually see how funny things happen in time.
How do you go as a scientist, just a random tangent question here, with something so long, like 20 years of looking at the same object, you've got to make sure that there's a few generations of computers involved.
Yeah, it is.
So how do you make sure that you keep that data?
And sometimes it is digging around on someone's office for the data. Now, for the most part, luckily, people have gotten better at recording and saving their data, especially national facilities of recording it and keeping it. But, it is an interesting point, because project management is a huge part of sometimes these things that you don't appreciate. And there's a reason why some telescopes that shall not be named, James one, run over $9 billion and are 10 years late. Astronomers should not be in charge of something. So if you have a very good, system that works, you can do these types of things. Otherwise, data does get lost.
And IT probably has to maintain some really antiquated systems.
We have computers from the early 80s that run a very specific type of operating system that can read one type of thing, but we need that for a machine.
It's something that isn't really thought about because it is just in the background there. Obviously, if you work in the industry, you know all about it. But it's something, you don't think about, that these long form investigations. They do require some technology of the time.
That's right. And, double backups and moving things around, and you will always have a hard drive failure at somewhere. And so then shifting 5 years of data from overseas, and it's a real part of, it's a non-glamorous, but a real part of the job.
Dot matrix printers, please tell me they're still alive.
We have one sitting down here. We don't use it, but there is one that we have rolls and reams of dot matrix printer paper at one of the telescope domes, though.
So what's next in the discovery? What do we need to find out to learn more?
So, one of the questions is then, if we can actually see the dragging, can they do it for other stars? Can they actually revolve structure on the space? Because one of the questions do some of what we call the fundamental constants actually change with space, either direction or time or distance? So these independent probes are quite good. If it gives probes about that, you can actually use it and how those effects interact with the stars, and then therefore potentially gravity. Is gravity behaving differently? So it offers a very independent probe of the structure of space, which allows you to go different ways independent of light. And this is kind of one of the exciting things. The more ways we have that aren't reliant on light, you can't just have someone say, oh, well, what if the speed of light's not constant? Everything's wrong. Well, these probes that are completely independent of light, like gravitational waves, keep telling us the same answer and keep new lines of evidence to probe the universe.
Fantastic, Brad. Well, there's another week of Talking Science. It's been fun. It's been real. Let's do it again next week.
Sounds good.